Welcome to Military Matters Fast Take. I'm Rod Rodriguez. That's Jack Murphy down there. And we have an amazing guest today to talk about our last episode about sexual harassment and sexual assault in the DOD. Katie Chorbak is a U.S. Army veteran. She is the president and founder of our Sisters Keeper movement. Katie, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, guys. I'm honored.
So I want to jump right into this. Tell me about the last episode we did. We talked with Aston Muse, who is kind of a Facebook famous personality, about specifically the Marine Corps TikTok video. We also talked a little bit about the annual report, which I think I kind of went hard on, but I think I did so for good reasons, of course. And by the way, I asked the DOD for some answers to the questions that I had. They didn't. The response was we had no one available for an interview, which is very interesting in and of itself. And I never got back any of the answers to the questions that I asked specifically. So with that said, the other half of the episode was covered by Jack Murphy, who spoke with Jack. What was the name of your
Raven
interview? That's right, Raven. So we talked about her situation where she was a victim who ended up behind bars herself. So that's a very quick recap for anybody listening. If you want to go back and listen to that episode now and then come back to this, that's the way to do it. Or just stick around and listen to Katie give us her take on that episode.
I think it was well done. So I took notes. I think what threw me is one of the first things that Sergeant First Class Muse did was question the victim's integrity, right? Is she like watched the video and was like, oh, what's this girl got going on? And I think that is par norm. And it's something that needs to change, is that women only make up 15% of the military. We need to stick together and believe survivors. And so that, like, it hit home as a woman, as a soldier of, there's a lot of women that just don't believe other women. I think in the end that she circled back around and did a great job of saying, like, hey, civilians need to take over because this is this is problematic. But yeah, that kind of threw me for a loop. First thing when I was listening is like, oh no, like another victim blaming woman. Phenomenal. But she did a really great job. I actually follow her. I followed her since she started her Facebook. I reached out to her last summer when we were doing our rallies. And then on to Raven, right? So Raven's story is not unique, which is sad. That is not that is a par norm story of every woman survivor and male survivor I've talked to. Retaliation is at like 68%. Right. That was in the report. It's on the Protect Our Defenders website of their sexual assault fact sheet in the military. Retaliation is the number one reason why women don't report, or men. Right. So another thing that stuck out to me is that she was never informed when her abuser was finally like going through the court martial. On the civilian side, right? So outside of the military, victims have rights. There's a Bill of Rights. I live in Florida. Victims have a Bill of Rights. They are to be informed of anything that is going on. Now, in the military, that is not the norm. I have heard story after story of these sentences being adjudicated, or admin SEP, or Article 15 even, and the victim never finds out of like what was the end result of me reporting. So yeah, like I thought it was well done. I think you guys did great. I think Sergeant First Class Muse just kind of threw me for a loop, like woman to woman, being like, oh no, not again, like not another one.
Well, is it any? I mean, you said it's kind of a normal thing to do. I'll be perfectly honest with you. I did the same thing. Yep. When I saw it, first of all, there was a couple of things that I have to look back at my initial reaction and go, okay, what? I kind of have to AAR my initial reaction. Like, my first question was, why are you on TikTok talking about this? TikTok is where I think of, like, children doing dance videos and doing goofy stunts, not where you would talk about
it may be a generational thing too,
Yeah.
Rod. Like for
We're
me,
old.
me and you, that
It
it
is.
doesn't make any sense at all. And I mean, I'd like to ask Katie, do you think the reason why it ends up there is because of the retaliation and because there's nowhere else to go for some young women, and the only outlet they feel they have is, well, social media? That's what they know.
Well, social media has been a great generator for MST victims and survivors to get together. Like even on TikTok, there's a hashtag of MST and it's been trending since Vanessa Guillen. It's definitively a generational difference. And plus, it's a way for them to get their voices heard, right? On a massive scale. People within the military know that sexual assault is a problem and has been a problem for decades. Civilians don't. So like, if we can't police our own, why wouldn't we tell civilians on a large scale at once, where it can go viral to where now civilians are involved and care? And so I thought, when I first saw the video, it was sent to me at like 3 a.m, honestly, and I woke up and watched it. My first reaction to that video was, oh no, not again. Like here is another victim of the system that's broken. And when she said, hey, this is why female service members kill themselves, it hit home. Like I was suicidal after my incidents. I had more than one while I was in the military and not being believed. And so when you have all of these people saying he should not be retained, he should be kicked out of the military, but you have one person with power saying, he's great at PT, he's good at shooting. And it's like, he committed a felony. So
that's interesting because a lot of folks were saying, and some of the feedback that I've heard and some of the criticisms that I've heard of her video is that, well, you weren't sexually assaulted. He didn't hurt you. He harassed you, which should be redeemable. So maybe there's a redeemable quality to this Marine. He's learned his lesson. But at the same time, the DOD purports to have a zero tolerance policy. So the question now becomes, what does zero tolerance actually mean? Does this mean you will be punished, or does this mean you're out?
Zero tolerance means absolutely nothing in the military. It doesn't. When I don't know if y'all saw the report that came out that the Air Force is keeping a convicted sex offender because the panel said that they should, right? Zero tolerance should be zero tolerance. Let's be honest. Sexual harassment and sexual assault is a crime. Rape is a felony. It's a felony. Like let's call that what it is. It's a felony crime. And when you're keeping people in committing these felonious crimes, that's how it's created the toxic culture. Now, as far as the pictures and stuff like that, right? Like we are in an information era where everybody, has a cell phone, everybody takes pictures, everybody does this. I mean, I personally have a zero rule on that. Like there is nothing on my phone that can be shared that will be embarrassing. Still inappropriate. Still should fall under zero tolerance policy. But the DOD has shown that zero tolerance means absolutely nothing. When you have convicted sex offenders that get to stay, when you have convicted sex offenders that get to retire with full benefits after conviction, it means nothing to anybody anymore. And it won't until zero tolerance means zero tolerance. If you are convicted of a crime, of a felony crime in the military, that you are put out without pay.
So Aston Muse, or Sergeant First Class Muse, and Raven both stated pretty much the same thing, that the current process for victims is inherently flawed because it is the military investigating the military. It is still a structure of chain of command, and it's still happening within your unit. I mean, the commander has the discretion to not make this a sexual. It's up to their call. The idea is that we put this in the hands of civilians. The other part of this, I'm sorry, the cat just jumped back here. Oh my God, he made his appearance anyway. The other part to this is that folks want this to become a civilian issue. They want to bring in a third party, which is where the Vanessa Guillen bill was supposed to be heading in that direction. But I've heard that the Vanessa Guillen bill, despite its great intentions, is going nowhere. Can you tell me a little bit about where the bill is today and what happened?
So the Vanessa Guillen bill was introduced by Jackie Spear, Congresswoman Spear, in the 116th Congress, right, towards the end of the session last year, right, before elections. It was co-sponsored by 187 people, bipartisan sponsorship, and was introduced into the Senate by Senator Hirono and sponsored by 4 co-sponsors. But when the election happened, all that bill died. Right. So what ended up happening, I'm a part of the Military Women's Coalition, and we have a subset committee on sexual violence that I sit on. We sent a letter to Congresswoman Spear and the DOD of our suggestions of changes to the bill. I saw that, Congresswoman Spear did an interview the other day that she plans on reintroducing the bill. And if that fails, that she'll try and put it in the NDAA. For this year, because it has to be authorized yearly. That, in my opinion, that's too long, right? We can't wait another year. We need change today. And so it was a collaborative of 10 different organizations and women across the country that came together, looked at the bill line by line, and came up with suggestions of how to change it to be better and more beneficial to today's service members, right? Because I've been out since 2014. That's 7 years coming up. So we had to get input from active duty as well. Women who are dealing, they're stuck in the suck today. So how do we make your life better tomorrow? So right now we're just waiting for a reintroduction. Any Congress member can introduce a bill into Congress. That's how our government is set up. But since Congresswoman Spear is the head of the House Arms Committee, it has to run past her. So why not her reintroduce it? You know what I'm saying? But some of the people that worked on it, Service Women Who Serve, Worth 1020, Justice for Vanessa Guillen, these are all women veterans across the country that have come together. Diana Danis is many of our mentors around the country, but she's been in this fight since the 80s, guys. And she's trying to pass the baton on to my generation. The Vanessa Guillen Act is not perfect, right? It has a lot of holes. It has a lot of things in it that will work if implemented. But trying to get Congress members, both sides, the House and the Senate, to agree to this bill is going to be difficult. And one of the first suggestions we made was about the change to the Ferris Doctrine. People have tried to overturn the Ferris Doctrine for years. It has not worked.
What is that?
The Ferris Doctrine is a piece of legislation that says that active duty military cannot sue the DOD. So this, within the bill, Natalie Quam put this in, Vanessa Guillen's family lawyer, to be able to sue the DOD, right, for negligence. Because if you look at the reports over the last, 40 years, on the civilian side, it would be negligence, culpable negligence at best. And so this would allow victims of negligence on the DOD's part to sue the DOD. But what we were asking is to separate that from potential benefits from the VA, right? Because if you take step pay when you leave and then you get on VA benefits, they recoup their money, right? Everybody knows that. So we're trying to change that little bit of, if you get, compensation after you win a case against the DOD, that it's not affected when you go for VA benefits. Another thing that was missed that we really need to address today is MEPS. I didn't know that there was a problem at MEPS. I did not have a bad experience. And it's my naivety that every woman has a great experience at MEPS. But Worth 1020 is a group, it's like a sister group of ours, all active duty women, all very young, right? Early 20s, who asked a simple question, like, what was your experience at MEPS? Guys, there was like 2,500 answers of like awful things happening at MEPS. And most of these girls were 17. Who do they turn to?
You're
Some of those
sending
people at
military
MEPS are
recruiters into high
contractors. They don't
schools.
fall under UCMJ.
Yeah, I mean, both of those are really good points. I didn't know anything was happening at MEPS. MEPS is not, it's so far outside of your military career. It seems like MEPS is just a blip. It's that formal
commanders.
Say again? I'm sorry, you would cut off at that. I didn't catch that.
UNF. So I go to the University of North Florida, and they're under investigation for sexual harassment within their ROTC program. So if that's happening there, it's probably happening nationwide, right? So we need to look into that. Recruiting standards, fraternization, right? It's frowned upon, right? Not like wholeheartedly. It's just kind of like wink, wink, like
Right.
Don't fraternize. Recruiting, though, fraternization should be a zero tolerance policy. Women should take care of women. Because if this is becoming problematic and we're having 17, 18-year-old girls sexually harassed and assaulted in recruiting and MEPS, welcome to the military, right? This is what you're going to expect over your career.
Well, it seems the military's always had a bit of an issue with the way we perceive ourselves and what human nature really is. We want to believe that every non-commissioned officer is an upstanding citizen, the epitome of professionalism and moral courage, but often we are not that. We are flawed human beings. People often go into that job field or pulled into recruiting and they never wanted to be recruiters, or they see it as, I have to do this in order to become this later on. This is my stepping stone to the next piece of career. So in that respect, it can often be the wrong people going in to do the job.
It's the same with sharp reps, though, right? Like victim advocates. It's an identifier on your ERB. One of the things that we're asking for is either take it out of the military or billet it. Make it its own MOS. That is your primary job, nothing else. You are not platoon sergeant, motor sergeant, and the sharp rep, right? Because then you're not going to take it seriously. But people who could possibly be billeted for that type of job, make sure they're capable of doing that. Like they're not just joining the military to do something easy, right? Because that's a tough job.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting when you're active duty, you see like additional duties, the key control guy, and what is it, height weight guy, and then
UA.
sharp rep. It's like, wait a minute.
Yeah, so this guy who's like the terminal E5 is also expected to play Sherlock fucking Holmes and investigate serious violent crimes. Like, do we really think that's going to happen? And it is. It's like the wolf is guarding the hen house in the sense that that's probably a sexist term, but okay, it is what it is. In the sense that you have some like really bad people filling those kinds of positions. Like I talked to a young woman who her best friend in the Army was sexually assaulted by another soldier. This girl did everything right. She called the sharp rep. The sharp rep comes to the barracks. His big fix to this says, lock her in her room, just lock the doors. And then he leaves.
See, that's somewhat so with my experience, right? I can only talk about my personal experience. I'll talk about Fort Hood, right? Because Fort Hood is a hot topic right now. My sharp rep on Fort Hood happened to be my platoon sergeant and happened to be female. So when I told her, she took it, to the oh, we're going to fight this to the end, Chorbak, until we get you some justice type of stuff, right? But if you don't take it seriously like that, and it's just a job identifier on your ERB to get your next promotion, like, do you really care? about what's happening to your soldiers. Like I sit on the Duval County Veterans Council, right? I'm the post 9/11 veteran vote. It's mostly Vietnam vets and Gen Xers. So every time I bring up this issue, they're like, oh, it wasn't a problem in my time. And I'm like,
Yeah, it was.
really? Like, did you not come to my last rally? I had 5 generations of women come forward, like 5. So that's your generation, my generation, the next generation. Like, it crosses everything. And so when they just don't recognize it for what it is. And we were talking about this before, right? Of like ambient sexual harassment. It's the culture to make sex jokes. I mean, the Army is the only place I learned rape jokes, and I learned it in sharp training, right? It's the only place that type of stuff is even somewhat acceptable. If any of that happened in the civilian world, you would lose your job and be sued, like very quickly. Whereas everybody in the military is just like, meh, you know, like it's just so off the shoulder. And it's just like Rod said, you know, like, oh, she laughed, so it must be okay. No, we laugh because we think we could be possibly murdered if we don't, right? It's gotten to that level.
And even if it's not at that level, you're still worried about the way you're going to be perceived by the people you got to go and work with for the next 3 or 4 years. You know, if they think you're
got to deploy overseas with.
Yeah, you're going to deploy with these people. You got to see them every single day. If you don't play along, it just makes your time there so much harder, so much longer than it actually has to be, instead of just having a professional environment.
And miserable.
And miserable.
Right. And miserable. And just like Jack said, we have to deploy with these people. If I can't trust you in the barracks, you think I'm going to trust you in a chew when there's nobody around? Right? Like, and Vanessa Guillen was a headline story, but not the only person murdered in the last year, right?
Quite a few.
Natasha Potion, Air Force, Elder Fernandez, like all of these names need to be mentioned, because at our rallies that we did, we listed them all that we could find after research. And then you have the problem of people being marked suicide that are obviously murder.
Like Lavina Johnson.
Obvious. Natasha Potion has a very similar story. Like this generation's Lavina Johnson is Natasha Potion from the Air Force.
I was recently interviewed about the Vanessa Guillen case episode that we did in season 2. And the interviewer was a civilian.
Interesting.
And she said, you know, tell me if I'm wrong, but the military is just a big old boys club, and that's why all of this happens. And I had to take a moment here to think about that statement. I had to disagree with her. I said, I don't necessarily think that because it's a boys club, all of these things are happening, or that the cover-ups occur. I think inherently the fundamental problem is that we are a organization of perfectionists, and that any imperfection is evaluated and judged as a personal imperfection on you. So if I'm Jack's soldier and I harass somebody, or I'm accused of sexual assault, the perception is Jack's a bad leader.
Well, yeah, there's definitely that
is bad leader, and everyone up the chain is a bad leader. So it behooves the chain of command to cover it up, because everybody's careers who had nothing to do with my assault, everyone's careers stay intact. So the perception of something could go wrong is enough to make people not want this to come to light. When if we had an environment, or we had a safe environment where we could say, hey, look, you can be, it'd be a system where we would not necessarily blame the entire chain of command, but encourage the chain of command to say, hey, look, we're not perfect. Bad things will happen. And because bad things happen, we want these things to come to light. We need these things to come to light. I think that might encourage folks to, okay, I'm not going to lose my command if I bring this out. But of
There-
course, if you
there-
helped it, that's a different situation.
There is that zero defect mentality in the military that affects this issue and so many other things. Is so detrimental to
Zero
the entire
defect.
force.
That's a good term.
But I think that when Katie's talking, or your friend was talking about it being a boys' club, I think what that relates more to is that there, like Katie was saying, there's 15% of the force is female. It's mostly male. And like, if you had asked me when I was active duty, I would have said the same. I would have had the same thread of denialism that older veteran you mentioned had. Like, this isn't an issue. This doesn't exist. And that's because you're inside this bubble. You're inside this very insular culture. It's this echo chamber, and you are not hearing women's voices in it's coming to the forefront. I would probably still be in that bubble if I didn't work as a journalist and did not interview victims like on a fairly regular basis. And then it really is. And once you do that, it starts to be right up in your face all the time, and impossible to any longer have that mentality of like, that shit just doesn't happen here.
Yeah. I mean, for it to be like, it is a boys' club, right? As a woman, I can say that it's 85% to 15, right? So like saying it's not a boys' club would be incorrect. I think the toxic culture has existed for so long that it's norm, right? Like, it's okay to make sexual jokes towards your soldiers and towards other females. Like, that's fine. We shouldn't have to accept that, right? I think the bigger difference though is like, and we've talked about this, is generational, right? Like, so I had this conversation with the Vietnam veterans on my council. Back in their time, talking about rape, taboo. Talking about homosexuality, taboo. Talk about going to see counseling, taboo. You know, everybody lied about it back then. They're like, oh, I'm going to the park. Like, whereas here in 2021, this generation, my generation, I'm a millennial, and Gen Zers are more than willing to be open and honest about struggles of, yes, rape happens. Yes, I am a survivor of rape. Yes, I go to therapy weekly for said rape. This is what my therapist said, right? And so it's a generational thing. And I'm hoping that the next generation, Gen Z has proven to be one of the more inclusive generations of this country that has ever existed, right? Like, they care about gender identity, they care about feelings, they care about all of this, right? Whereas in the military, we go by the like, fuck your feelings, right? Like that's a huge thing in the military. I have said it to numerous people throughout my life. But having to face that and sit in the uncomfort of us being a flawed system, because we don't want to be flawed, right? The military is supposed to be above board, right? We are supposed to be top notch, 1% of the public. You know, we serve, we do good things. But in reality, the military is full of shitbags. It always has been, right? And so let's recognize that for what it is that when we had a war on two fronts, and we had an extreme draw up in the military, right? Because I was in during all of this. We lacked standards. We laxed them. And we let in a bunch of people should have never been in the military. Because I remember walking around Fort Hood and I saw this guy with like a massive neck tattoo. And I was like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah. We also promoted a lot of people who should never have been promoted. People became officers. People became warrant officers. People became senior enlisted folks.
And that directly leads to problems like, you know, you get the Bo Bergdahls in the ranks and all of the problems that creates, you know.
So here you are, like, we're in 2021, right? So we've been at war for 20 years, right? So now these people who should have never been in the military are leaders.
Senior leaders, yeah.
And that's problematic because they should have never been allowed in. Right. Because after the drawdown, we've gone back like, no, nobody's let in that shouldn't be it. Like, right. We're not doing waivers anymore into the military at this point because we have enough people. But what we really need to look at is backtrack of like, who did we let in and who is leading our military now? Like, are they complete shitbags? Should we not have let them in the first place? But now they're platoon sergeants and first sergeants and sergeant majors. Problematic.
Katie, you are the president and founder of our Sisters Keeper movement. Tell me a little bit about that organization and what you guys are doing.
So we're an activist group. It started on a whim, guys. I threw up on my Facebook page. It was protesting season. I come from a very socially activist family. And so I just threw it out there hey, anybody want to go protest at Hood? Right. And then it kind of blew up because I forgot we were in the middle of a pandemic, right? So everybody was can't go to Hood, but I'll do it in my city. And I was like, bet, right? So August 1st, we did our first one, and we did it in 27 cities across this country. Women, veteran, MST survivor led, where we activated the public. We got civilians involved, Gold Star families. Then we did a second round on October 3rd, and we did 29 cities, including Hong Kong. So it became international, right? Because when I talk to, I have some Canadian battle buddies that are in the Canadian military that I met on Hood. It's a problem in their military too. Same in England. It's a problem across the world. So our first push for this year is we're doing a candlelight vigil on April 24th across the country. It's 2 days after the 1-year murder of Vanessa Guillen, and it's Sexual Assault Awareness Month. So our big push right now, like we were talking about, the military knows we have this problem. Veterans know that this is a problem. You know who needs to know? Civilians. Why? Their tax dollars pay us. Their tax dollars pay for NDAA, they pay for my disability, they pay for all of this, and they don't know why, right? Why is this happening? They should be aware. And I'm not on that huge, no justice, no enlistment thing. I'm not into that. That's not my organization does not back that in the least. We can't say women don't enlist. No, women, we need to get into positions of power and quickly, right? We need to quickly rise through the ranks, become senior leaders, become officers, change it from within, because that's how you fix any system, right? Is from within. So we're an activist group. I literally just wanted to protest because everybody else was protesting in the country. So I was like, we should protest. And honestly, it blew up. And I didn't expect it to. I actually drove from Jacksonville, Florida to Fort Hood to be at the Rancier Gate to lead that protest. And I met some of Vanessa Guillen's family members and LULAC and all of that out there and, got connections. And by the way, don't ever drive from Florida to Texas. It is the worst drive. 28 hours, by the way, 28 hours across the country. But it was important, right? Because I'm a survivor of Hood. I was a victim of Hood. My perpetrator, I never got justice either. A lot of my battle buddies never got justice. So being there was healing. And my wife came with me, and I had a massive PTSD thing while I was there because I had not been back since. I left Hood and was fuck this place. And so when I was actually in the HEB, I was oh my God, what am I doing here? This is the worst place for me to be. But no, we're an activist group. We're just trying to get the word out, get civilians involved, Gold Star families, and some answers, right? For some of these families. I know Vanessa Guillen's family wants answers, but so does Natasha Potion. So does Elder Fernandez. The Fort Hood report, and I watched, there's another congressional hearing today, but I watched that one last week where those people said, CID failed, right? CID failed hardcore, and they didn't mention the Elder Fernandez case, but you could tell that's who they were talking about. Of yeah, he probably didn't hang himself, right? So one of the things that becomes problematic, especially with Lavina Johnson and these people being marked suicides, is they don't get life insurance. They get nothing. Their child is murdered and they get nothing from the military. They don't even get a military burial. So not even a flag to say, yeah,
well, marking it as suicide also completes the conspiracy that now there's no murderer that you ever have to catch.
Right. And they said that in that report, is that they found serial offenders within the first 3 days of looking through files. I think that is one good positive thing that has come out of this, is the catch a serial offender program that they implemented. I've read into it. It looks great. I don't know anybody personally who has used it yet, but I'm sure I will within the next few years. But there is serial offenders. And one of the things that we're asking for that is not within the Vanessa Guillen bill at all is at enlistment, cross with CODIS, right? They take our DNA. Right. They have our DNA. We can never commit a crime because if they run it, we're going to be caught. Right, guys? And that's it. But why not at MEPS run that DNA through CODIS, the FBI database of unsolved sexual crimes? Make sure they're not a predator. Make sure that they have not committed sexual crimes and they're trying to get into the military to circumvent the legal system.
I don't know about this crazy idea that you've got here. That sounds like complete lunacy. Due diligence? What? No, that's nuts.
Right.
Tell me about where can we find out more information about your organization and what you guys are up to?
So we're on Facebook at Our Sisters Keeper Movement. We're on Twitter. I think it's at Our Sisters Keeper Movement. We have a TikTok, because y'all were like, generation. We have a TikTok, Instagram. We have it all, right? And we also have info at oursisterskeepermovement.org is our email address. I answer that, so you can email me anytime. We're just trying to get more people involved, right? On a larger scale.
Listen, Katie, back in our day when we wanted to do dance videos, we set up the VHS recorder. And that's how we destroyed it. Just
cable access, man.
Cable access channel. There you go.
Katie, I'm not that young, guys. I'm in my early. So I remember that. I just that's important to this younger generation, is very short. I think the human attention span is 7 seconds. So doing it smaller in a video is smart, right? So I do suggest, though, that you guys, if you do have time, go on TikTok and watch some of those videos. There's thousands and thousands of them.
I introduced Mr. Murphy to TikTok after this Marine video thing, and I wish we had recorded it because I introduced him to a couple of the biggest TikTok names. I'm talking. I can't remember their names now, but they're huge. They're the.
I asked my daughter about Bella Porch. She was like, I have no idea who that is.
They're the influencers, right? There was the other one, Chartinobly or something like that. She's bigger. She's the one that your daughter has a book from.
Charlie the something.
His reaction, I'll never forget. He watches a TikTok video for 10 seconds and goes, "What? What? What is this? They're famous for this? That got how many views?" And I was like, "Brother, that got 10 million views. They've got 1.8 billion likes. You're right. This is the new it is the new platform, but for us it was MySpace. What the hell is MySpace?
Yeah, MySpace. I had a MySpace. I am that old.
Old school.
I think that it's ever changing, right? And so with this younger generation, social media is the way to go. That's how we get our word out, is social media. Like I said, there's 10 different organizations that helped send this letter for recommendations, and we are all in cahoots with each other. So it's hey, we're doing this, post it across all of these different platforms, to get more visibility and people involved. And so that's how all those rallies started, right? Is I just put it on my Facebook and then copy and posted to Sisterhood of Veterans, service women who serve, all of these Beauties and Boots, right? I don't know if y'all have heard of Beauties and Boots, but at one point there was 350,000 female veterans in that group.
Wow.
So yeah, they got shut down recently. It was real weird.
Katie, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to talk with us. And
Hey, thanks for having me.
I know that it can be difficult to listen to a show about these types of things, being a survivor yourself. So in that regard, again, thank you so much for not just taking time to talk with us, but for listening to our episode. I know that couldn't have been easy, but we do appreciate it, and thank you.
A lot of therapy. So I've been through a lot of therapy at this point in my life. But that's one good thing, right? Is I know that the Vietnam veterans, like there's like this generational gap of like interest and stuff like that. But it is something that I'm grateful for Vietnam veterans, for fighting for veterans today, to have things such as the PTSD clinic and the women like Diana Danis who fought in the 80s to get women healthcare for MST at the VA, right? Like, so that's pretty recent. Like, and then the Deborah Sampson Act passed. I don't know if y'all are aware of that. It passed in the last NDAA. And so it's opening up a few more things to women, and it'll allow for legal aid within the VA system, which is important. But yeah, no, I mean, I'm grateful to be here. I'm grateful for y'all's generation too, right? Because y'all were in the suck. We got benefits because of y'all. And that's why I do what I do mainly, is that my father was a Vietnam veteran. My grandfather was in the Battle of the Bulge. Like, I am a generational veteran all the way back to the Spanish-American War. And so fighting for change, so that when I have children, if they want to join, I know they're just like this much more safe, right? Like, I don't have to worry about what happened to me happening to them. And if it does, it's gonna be taken care of properly instead of ignored.
Folks, that was Katie Chorbak. She's the U.S. Army veteran, president, and founder of Our Sisters Keeper movement. And as we wrap this episode up, she managed to make me feel incredibly old. So if you want to find me on Twitter, you can find me at RodPodRod. That is the incredible Jack Murphy, but also really old, out of touch, doesn't know what's going on with the kids these days. Jack, where can people find you, bud?
I'm on Twitter at Jack Murphy RGR.
And of course, you can always find us, Military Matters. We are at Stripes Pod on Twitter, or you can email us directly, militarymatters@stripes.com. We read the email. We want to know what you think. If you have any leads or ideas for a story, please reach out to us. We will contact you back. We're very interested. Other than that, thank you so much, and we'll see you guys at the next episode.